right, everyone. Well, welcome. My name is Marissa. If you don't know me, I am an educator at the Lacey Museum. Quick show of hands, who's been to the museum? All right, so a lot of you. If you haven't been, right now we do have a Sasquatch exhibit going on. We did extend it until the end of this month, so September 28th is our last day for Sasquatch Revealed. Right now our hours, we are Thursdays and Fridays 11 to 3, and Saturdays from 10 to 4. You'll see me there most days, so if you want to just come on by and see me or take a look at that Sasquatch exhibit, we'd love to have you. A few orders of business before we begin. We will be having more history talks just like this, so we want to thank all of you for coming to our first one of our fall season. After this, next week on September 24th, so next Tuesday, we'll have Dennis Larson here. He's going to talk about the Notches Pass Trail, so that first overroad, wagon train. From what we hear, it was a rather miserable experience, but in some very unique ways. So he'll tell us all about that. On October 12th, we'll have a local author, John Dodge. He was a reporter with the Olympian. He'll come down and he'll talk about his book, A Deadly Wind, which is on the 1962 Columbus Day storm. So that one will be a really good talk as well. We also have something new this year. We have a bus tour, a historic bus tour of Thurston County coming up on October 13th. So that will be a Sunday. You can register for that through the city Parks and Recreation Department. So we have all of our brochures and everything right over there if you'd like to learn more about us. So now we will go ahead and make sure to please turn off your phones. This is a good time to do that. And I will give you a short introduction to this lovely person you met right here. It has happened before, yes. Father Peter Tynan is a Benedictine monk, pardon me, of St. Martin's Abbey here in Lacey. He was born in rural Nebraska in 1968 and attended the University of Nebraska. After college, he went on to earn a couple master's degrees in preparation to become a university librarian. Due to his ability to read Latin, his first library job, my pronunciation is off tonight, at Marquette University in Milwaukee was in the archives. From that time on, he has been involved in historical work. In 2002, Father Tynan came out to Washington State to take a job at St. Martin's University. Out of curiosity, he tried the monastic life and it stuck. The monastery sent him off to a seminary in Mount Angel, Oregon, where he earned yet another master's degrees and was ordained as a Roman Catholic priest in 2011. Now back at St. Martin's University, he serves as University Chaplain and its archivist. Please welcome our guest.
Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm Father Peter Tynan, and I'm so happy to give tonight's presentation about a place that I love, St. Martin's University. Because, I better love the place where I'll eventually get buried, right? Now then, where do I get my information for tonight's talk? First of all, we have our 50th anniversary in between the years. Now, so this was put out in 1945. Now, this is a really good source, and I'd love it for it to be available to so many people, but you kind of need to go to the archives at our place to see it, but it gives a lot of good details. Now then, Father John Scott of happy memory put out another book for our centennial, this place called St. Martin's. And he's got a different perspective. In fact, both these books they're both histories, they're both drawing from the same facts, but they have slightly different interpretations. And I'll get into that. I find these things fascinating, how you can take the same facts and see and tell two different stories. But then again, anyone who's married probably knows about that phenomena as well. And finally, I have some letters between then Father Barron, who eventually became Abbot Barron, and Abbot Peter back in Minnesota, St. John's, where our monastery was founded. And these are very fascinating letters because they're very frank about how things are going. Later on here, a little deeper in, Father Barron gets a little frustrated because, as you know, nothing worthwhile is easy, and when things are hard, it's just kind of like, I kind of miss Minnesota. So, and that happens. Now, I'm going to hand this over real quick because I would like the city of Lacey to have some electronic copies of that while we have it outside our archives. They're very precious to us, so I can't let them leave my eyes, so I know that they got it right back there. So then, nothing worthwhile is easy. This is one of my big lines that I use in my other job of preaching to people, because I think it's worth, it's something, it's a bit of wisdom that I think we all can probably tape onto our mirror, because for the pioneers who came out here, who wanted to establish themselves out here on the Pacific coast, things weren't easy. It just wasn't easy. We take things for granted these days. Now, in a couple weeks, I'll be flying back to Omaha, Nebraska for my nephew's wedding, and I'm griping because I'm taking a red eye. But as we're going to find out, for these monks to come out here, it was a whole adventure. And so let's get into that first adventure. There we go. So our first adventure begins with an initial invitation. Now, this initial invitation came out of Oregon. The bishop in Oregon wanted monks. Why? Because he needed people. He just flat out needed people. And a lot of the priests, they wanted to go where the action was, which was down in California, because California, they had gold, they had money, and you kind of like to go where you're not always having to look for money. And it just makes things simpler. And we'll get into that also in a little bit, money. So in 1881, Archbishop Gross of Portland and Father Ed O'Day, who's heard of the term O'Day, right? Yeah, O'Day High School, yeah. So these two priests, what they did is that they got on a steamer out of Portland, rode down to San Francisco, got on the Transcontinental Railroad, took it to Omaha, got on another train, went up to Minneapolis, and then did another transfer and ended up in Collegeville, Minnesota, which today is about a 2.5-hour drive north and west of Minneapolis, St. Paul, to come to St. John's Abbey. What they were looking for were monks to come and take care of what they said were Indian missions. Why'd they come to the monks in Minnesota? Because they were working with the Indians in Minnesota. So they said, hey, you guys are already doing this work in Minnesota. Why don't you come out to Oregon and do it as well? Great opportunity to find a way to extend the good work that you're doing. Come on, guys, you want to come. Now, unbeknownst to the monks at St. John's was that, I want to adjust something here on my notes real quick, was that the Archbishop made another visit out in Indiana to St. Meinrad to invite some Swiss monks. Now, I have to tell you something. We all kind of look the same, but we're different. Believe me. So we're the American Cassinese congregation. Despite the Italian name, Cassinese is the term from Monte Cassino. We're actually from Bavaria. That's the beer, brat, and cheese variety folks. That's us. We're a little more lax. or as our competitors, the Swiss monks, like to say, Casanese easy. We're easy monks. Now then the Swiss, you got to think of the cuckoo clock for the Swiss congregation. Very precise, and they have a lot of rules. Hey, and that's great. I go to, I did my seminary down at Mount Angel. They're a great bunch of guys, but I'm so happy to be back at St. Martin's because, we have a little more flexibility at our place. But nevertheless, they went and talked to those other monks because he thought, hey, why not get the price for 2 for 1? I'll put the Swiss monks in the lower part of my diocese, maybe down in Eugene, and then I'll have those monks from St. John's, just around Oregon City. And hey, double the coverage, double the monks, double the priests. Got my workers, and hey, they took a vow of poverty. I don't have to worry about them running down to California. So, as it turned out, Abbot Alexis decided, that was the current abbot so let me go and do the name call here. So this is starting over here on your left. I believe that's your left will be Archbishop Gross. Next to it is O'Day. And then on the far right is Abbot Alexis, and he was the abbot at St. John's at the time. Now, you notice they all wear those big honking crosses. They're called pectoral crosses. That's the bling. Now, notice that both bishops and abbots wear those. And that's just a sign that you're what's called a primate priest. It's sort of you have a certain autonomy yourself, that you're overseeing others. And so that's what that's a sign of. We just call it the bling in the monastery. But the official term is a pectoral cross. Now then, the story. Alexis, he says, okay, I'm going to check this out. So he gets on a train, heads down to Omaha, takes a transcontinental railroad, gets to San Francisco, and arrives in Portland in December. Now, what's our December weather like? Rain. And you know what he contracted? Tuberculosis. He's just like, I hate this place. I'm not sending anyone here. And so he got back on the steamer. Now, he didn't send his no until his steamer stopped in San Francisco. And it says this right, wrote back, Dear Archbishop Gross, thanks for the invitation. No. We may come back out when the Northern Pacific Railroad is completed, and we're going to be opening a school and not a mission. Thank you. He went back to St. John's and died. So, yeah, in the snow. Tuberculosis was a reality back in those days, and it's as I say, life wasn't easy back then. You had to be a hard person. Now then, there came then in 1891 a second invitation. Now, at this time, the Northern Pacific Railroad was just completed. So, in 1891, Father Hailebus, they also had odd names back then, folks, of St. Leo's Parish in Tacoma. There was one Catholic parish in Tacoma at the time. Now, he invited the monks to come out to Washington State to minister to the German-speaking Catholics. Now, the thing we need to realize is that, back in the day, a lot of the immigrants chose to, lo and behold, speak the language in which they grew up with. And so the immigrants back then, there were a lot of Germans. You go at that time in Milwaukee, you had German newspapers. In Chicago, you had Polish newspapers. You had, and then there were just different society halls and whatnot. It's just that, people were, we call this a big melting pot, but it wasn't happening as fast as we like to remember. It actually took time for the German community to really anglicize. So the Germans were making a big stink saying, we want our own priests. We're tired of these Irish. So anyone who spoke English was considered Irish. And they wanted a good German-speaking priest. And Father Helebus, he's just like, I'm tired of these guys complaining. Okay, what do we need to do? We need to get some good German monks out here. And so he talked to them, talked to some of his Germans. So, where can we get them? Well, some of them came from St. Paul, Minnesota, and they say, St. John's Abbey. They have good German monks. Send one out here. And so what he did is that he went and talked to his bishop. The bishop sent an invitation. And so the next abbot of St. John's was known as Abbot Bernard. So, did I? No. There we go. So Father Helebus, so he was a Monsignor, a different type of outfit. This here is Abbot Bernard, and there is early Sacred Heart Parish. Because as the word was going out, the Germans, they were an impatient bunch. They went and built the parish themselves. And so that was the original Sacred Heart Parish. And I know Sacred Heart is in the news right now, and it's a sad story for the folks at Sacred Heart. And we'll get a little more into some of the history there, which has some ironic echoes as well. Is that but they went and they built the church. Said, we built the church. Now send us the priest. And so Abbot Bernard decided to come out to Tacoma. Hey, it was easy because he could just take the train, right? It's a lot easier than taking a steam, making all these connections and coming up from San Francisco. So he took the train out. And what time of year did he come out? June. And he went and visited. The whole, the German community was there, all waving, hello, yay, hello, how you doing? And they joined him. They went and looked at the parish, and there, lo and behold, there's a lot of roses growing around there. And Abbot Bernard was like, roses, just like the rosary. We are going to call this place Holy Rosary Parish after all these beautiful roses. He says, I am going to send a priest out to you. Don't worry. And so he did. He sent out Father William Everson. He was a German-speaking priest, and he came out in 1891 to take up residence. Now, when he got there, he found out a few things. They handed over him the books. And in the books, as he could make out, it's just like, whoa, this is a mess. From now on, I will take care of the finances, not you guys. And number two, he found out that the whole building was on a loan. They built it, but they said, here you go. Oh, and here's the bill. And he's just like, what? Or actually probably said, was? Which is German for what, and the German community there expected him to pay the bill. It's like, hey, you're here, right? You monks, you guys, energetic monks, you're gonna pay, right? It's like, no, you guys are going to pay because I'm just here to serve you. This is your parish. This is your community. We need you to pay this bill. Now, fortunately, it wasn't the 18 million that Holy Rosary is facing now, but it's still a pretty big bill. And Father, he just got there, and he just he took up residence in the church sacristy. Now, how many of you know what a church sacristy is? He has that little back room where you get ready. Now, do you want to live in the back room of a church? No. But he didn't have anywhere else to go. And he also wanted to get education done right away. So up in the choir loft, now let's go back for a second. Look how big that church is. Okay, imagine how big the choir loft is. He was teaching 35 kids up in that choir loft right there. And he started in August. Man, yeah, hot. So I guess when he's doing catechesis, he didn't have to do much to remind them why you wanted to be a good boy or girl, because you don't want to end up in a hot place like this. Now, eventually, he wrote back to Minnesota, and he invited 3 nuns out to come and start the Holy Rosary School. And so they got going. They started the school, and they got they built a 3-story building, and then on the first floor the nuns lived. On the second floor, the school rooms were there, and then on the 3rd floor there is some other recreational halls for the German community. Now the thing is that Father William, he worked very hard. He tried to build up that parish, but the thing is that the original idea was that it was going to be just a German parish. It was called a national parish at the time. And the idea is that we're here to serve German Catholics of Tacoma. But then, after a while, he was doing 3 services, what we Catholics call masses a week, a Sunday. And pretty soon he started preaching English at 2 of the 3 to the Irish. He was preaching for the Irish. And so the Germans they were miffed. It's just like, hey, he came out all the way for us. For us. And now 2 out of 3 of your homilies on Sunday are in English for the Irish. And he got up and told them, the Irish pay. Now, listen, I'm of German ancestry, and that hurts. That hurts. But, you gotta hand it to Father William. He told the truth. And hey, listen, you guys start paying more, you start supporting this parish, then, hey, you'll get more German. But the truth is, in the end, there weren't as many Germans out here as the monks thought, or as the Germans realized. In fact, many of the Germans out here were rather irreligious. You come out here all the way out to the West Coast. Many times people came out here because they were trying to get away from something. And and the Pacific Ocean kind of stops you from going any further. So, they just came out here and here they were. So the thing is that not all the Germans were interested in exercising their faith, and some of those who did, they were kind of half-hearted about the affair, and there just weren't as many out there to support. Now, nevertheless, the Abbot Bernard and the monks at St. John's were excited about the prospects of coming out here. They thought, this is our chance to start a new monastery. And so they sent out Father Wolfgang Stenner. And let me tell you something about when we come out to found a monastery, what things that monks look for historically. So let me grab the other microphone. This is me doing very bad computer art, by the way. Go big or go home, plans for a new monastic foundation. So Father Wolfgang was sent out here to look for a foundation for a monastery. Now the plan for a monastery in the American Cassinese congregation, and somewhat to the Swiss as well, with slight variations, was that every monastery had to have a farm. This was your economic engine. This is what pays the bills is that you need to get a lot of land so you can farm, and the farm is going to run things, which means you want religious brothers, lay brothers. That means monks who have no intention of becoming priests, because priests, our hands are made for chalices, not calluses. We're a bit soft. I'll admit it. You need good, hardworking people to get the farm going, because the farm is going to get you money to build that nice big building, which is basically, folks, it's a dormitory with a kitchen and a dining room and guest parlors. A monastery, they look fancy. A lot of them look fancy on the outside. It's a very basic structure. And then you get a school going. Why do you get a school going? Because you need to get future monks going. You need to get an area where you can recruit young men. And so, but, how do you get men to come to your place? Well, you get priests to go out to the different parishes and say, hey, send your sons to our high school and college, and we'll educate them. Now, the thing is that the community envisioned by the monks was going out and serving German-speaking Catholics. So that's what brought us out here. It's like, hey, there's a German community out here in Washington State, and we're going to start German parishes and sending German boys to our school, and they're going to learn, they're going to see the farm. Some of them are going to be attracted to work in the farm as brothers. The smart ones will become priests. We'll send them out to more parishes, more monks, more workers, bigger farm, more money, more monks. It keeps going, and then you start a new monastery once you get a lot of monks. Usually once you reach about 100, 200 monks, it's time to start a new place. St. Martin's never got that big, by the way. But St. John's did. So when Father Wolfgang came out here, he was looking for land. He wanted a chunk of land, ideally about 1,000 acres. But, monks can be cheap. It's that poverty thing, right? So he didn't want to pay too much. Now, the land between Tacoma and Seattle, that's where we wanted to go. That's where we wanted to get started. But it cost about $100 an acre, and that was too much money. We said, it's like, oh, wow, this would be perfect. In between two big cities, we can have parishes in Tacoma and Seattle, just bring people in. Great location, but the price. I always thought we should have gone and looked over in Auburn maybe, but oh well. There you have it. We ended up going to Dryad first. That was the first place we looked. Do you know where Dryad is? Yeah, it's... Yeah, you're being very generous, too. Yeah, Dryad isn't anything right now. It's about 45 miles east of Centralia, Chehalis, and it's on the Chehalis River. But the soil was black. It was good soil there. And the monks were just like, wow, this is really good farmland. As I say, we got the economic engine here. And so they wrote back to St. John, says, I think we found the land that we're looking for. I think, we think this might be a pretty good place to get started. And so he, there went my screen. And there goes that. There we go. Get my notes back up. And so he did some negotiations. He bought the land, $25 an acre. And so they got the land, but he bought it. He says, wow, this is really good land. We're going to have a really good farm here. This is going to be a great place for a monastery. But Abbot Bernard asked the question, and what about the school? What about the school? because it's not, let's just say Dryad, the Chehalis River, it's not on the way to any place. So, and the railroad really wasn't moving out that way, and it just didn't. He was kind of like, but it's really good farmland, and no, that just wasn't working. So they had the land. They thought, well, maybe we can get started here and then build up some money and get things going. Now then, meanwhile in Olympia, we have that dapper young man there, Answorth Hardaway Chambers. So this guy, he was born here, actually. He's born in the region. And he started off as a butcher. But, he kind of made his way. And he was 3-time mayor of Olympia. He was, let's see, I have this in my notes, some different things. He had the controlling interest in the gas and electric light works, was director of the First National Bank, business manager for the Hotel Olympia, and a philanthropist, which he was the mayor of Olympia, as I said, from 1886 to 1888. Not bad for a guy who started out as a butcher. Now, he was a big booster of Olympia. He wanted Olympia to succeed because at the time, Olympia was worried it was going to lose its status as the state capital because you had Tacoma right to the north, city of destiny. And then Seattle was starting to make a move as well. And he was looking for ways to build up Olympia, to keep the state government there. Now, the first thing he did was to work with them Catholics in getting a hospital, because Olympia didn't have a hospital. And so in the late 1800s, he worked with Mother Joseph, to build St. Peter's here in this region, because no one else started a hospital. And Mother Joseph, if you can convince her something can be done, it's going to be done. She got things done. She must have had a pretty mean-looking ruler, because she got stuff done. And Chambers was a big part of bringing her in. And little known fact here is that the Providence health system is free from it by act of the state legislature, doesn't have to pay taxes. Because early on, not all the hospital rooms were filled. So state senators and representatives would board at the hospital. And sometimes they would go and have their lunch at the hospital. And so, yes. Well, that was the old St. Peter's. It was actually right next to the Capitol campus. So it was really convenient. And so the state legislators, they really didn't think that one through, because they didn't, they probably just thought, they're just going to have a few hospitals here and there. They didn't realize it was going to grow into this big, giant healthcare system. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised, and I get upset, but not too upset if they reverse that ruling. But yeah. But these are the things that Chambers saw he needed to do, because he realized that there was this organizational ability behind these Catholic religious organizations. He wasn't a Catholic himself. He was a good Protestant, but he wanted the region to be prosperous. He wanted Olympia to be prosperous. So he realized, hey, we need these people here. So we've got our hospital. Now we need to get those monks in. And we need a school. We need a college here, because that's what we need to do. Now, I'd be Now, one thing you're not going to find out in Father John's history is that A.H. Chambers was big in the local Democratic Party. My confrere of happy memory used to dress up as Abraham Lincoln every Halloween. Why? Because he really liked Abraham Lincoln's party. And so I think he's a little biased here. Now, I don't know. He's not here to defend himself, but I have a sneaking suspicion. So just take it as it is. But H. Chambers was a big member of the Democratic Party. And how did Democratic Party has always been known to support immigrants. And it was true as in 1991, as it is now in 2019, and he saw some potential in bringing the monks out here, because he looked down at Mount Angel, which was founded. Actually, Mount Angel went and took the bait from Archbishop Gross. They came out in the 1880s, and when the monks came out, who also came out? German immigrants, German-speaking immigrants, a lot of potential voters for the Democratic Party. So maybe if he brings these monks in from Minnesota, oh my goodness, more people and more consumers as well. Seemed like a great idea. Now then, let's moving on. A pitch made for a limb. So there's Father Wolfgang, who we've been talking to. This is Father Claussens of St. Michael's Parish. He is pretty instrumental in working with A.H. Chambers to bring in these Catholic organizations. So he's a bit of the point man in Olympia. And Father Claussens invited in and said, "Hey, Wolfgang, listen, I know you monks are looking for some property. I think you ought to do it here. And I know this guy, A.H. Chambers, he's going to do whatever needs to be done to get you that land." And so the three of them, Father Wolfgang, the monk, Father Claussens of St. Michael's Parish, and A.H. Chambers, they sat down, they had a meeting, they talked about the idea, and then A.H. Chambers, remember he's pretty big in politics. He goes over to the state land commissioner and asks what's available nearby, because I have this plan. Some monks are looking to come out, and we may have some more settlers coming in, some German-speaking people. We can really use that. We can really use some residents right now, and so the state land commissioner, he knew of a section of land near the town of Woodland, named after land donated by Isaac Woods for a train station. Am I right about that? Isaac Wood. So woodland. So it's not because there's trees, but because it's Isaac Wood. Thanks. See, that's why I try to stay away from serious historians. And some of it was set aside for education as well. So it was proper that the monks got it. In fact, some people were wondering, from the proceeds of the land that was going to be sold to us, did some of it go to help build Washington State University? Well, maybe. That'd be something I could look into if I get a sabbatical one of these days, which, I'll go talk to Abbey Neal about that one. And so Wolfgang, Claussens, A.H. Chambers, they went out and looked at the land. Father Wolfgang, love the name. Father Wolfgang liked the site and wrote to Abbot Bernard to change the planned location. He approved and said they would sell the Dryad property and invest in the Woodland property. But then, the Panic of 1893 took place. I know, it's like, okay, Father, yeah. Okay, now imagine the Great Depression, because this is only slightly worse than the Great Depression. And it hit Washington State hard. Over 100 banks in our state are said to have failed, and cash was so scarce that people in Bellarmine and Port Townsend had to create their own currency. Now, Olympia, they were dependent on timber at the time, so an economic downturn throughout the whole nation meant less construction going on, and so less need for timber and the mills to process timber. These were pretty bad times, and things were really hard. And this was the time in which the monks were deciding to come out here. Now, at the same time, in the cultural milieu, anti-Catholic sentiments. Of course, why not? Now in July 1893, a papal envoy, Archbishop Francesco Satoli, came out here. So he's visited Spokane, Seattle, Tacoma, Portland, San Francisco, and his visit out here proved very popular. Remember all the Germans who came out to wave hello to Father William as he came to take over the parish? Well, when this new archbishop came out, who's going to be the papal ambassador to the United States, when he came out, it was the Irish and the Germans and the Polish and the Slovenes and the Italians. They were all out there. And who did that spook? The good, decent Protestants. They were spooked. It's like, we didn't realize that there were all these Catholics living around us. Yeah. And to anti-Catholics, it was like Catholics cannot be good Americans. It just didn't make sense, because you were loyal to a foreign power, the Pope in Rome. So because in their minds, if the Pope tells you to vote a certain way, you're going to do that. And of course, the Pope is going to tell every Catholic in the United States how to vote. I think we have enough Catholics here in this room to know that's pretty darn ridiculous. Because, believe me, Catholics tend, at this day and age, we pretty much split. So, it is as it is. Now, to an anti-Catholic, to those, they wanted, they were big supporters of the public school system, and in the public school system to teach the Bible, because between the public schools and the Bible, they were going to be the two stones of the mill that would grind Catholicity out of Catholics. So basically, compulsory public school attendance. There will be no private schools. Everyone has to go to public schools. And when you go to public school, you will have good Protestant Bible education. So basically, public school was just another name for Protestant school from our perspective. But that led to a very ironic thing. Catholics went to court to have the Bible removed from public schools. It's like, this is one of those drop the mic moments, but I respect the property of the city of Lacey too much to do that. It's just like, oh, okay. But, that was their experience back in the day. And that was part of the reason why Catholics built up a school system, is so that, we could preserve, our religious beliefs, because they weren't going to be respected in the public school system. And yeah, it's kind of, yeah, it's a little odd, but that's how things were back in those days. people were spooked because they thought that this was a big ploy by foreign powers to take over America, that we were this fifth column that was going to reestablish monarchy and Romanism throughout all of America, and we're going to kill this great democratic experiment going on. And they were scared because they just realized, wow, there's a lot more of them around us than we realized. Now then, right on the heels of this Archbishop's trip was the president of the APA. APA stood for the American Protective Association. His name was W.H. Traynor, and he came out right behind him because he kind of knew what he was doing. He knew how upsetting it was going to be for a lot of people to see this Catholic archbishop be met by all these waving supporters. It'd be... Now, I could probably make an analogy right now about what would be just as troubling for you to see going on in your community, but I'm not going to go there. But just think about some of the things that were going on in Portland this summer. Yeah, so, it was very tense. It's just people were scared. Because they said, they thought this was a threat to their nation. And so this Mr. Traynor came out right behind him to organize in the state of Washington. He said, hey, we are organizing to do something about this. And so in early 1894, he helped form a council here in Olympia. George Washington von Fosser of Tacoma was named the state president. He was a former Methodist pastor, then a lawyer, then a judge. Washington newspapers, however, did not support the APA. The Seattle PI was called a sheet of papacy for its failure to support the APA. Now, it's a sort of but the APA was persistent. They set out former priests to give public talks in Tacoma. So, the former priest would, go in and just say, it's kind of like a former employee talking about their old employer. A lot of bitterness going out, and also the APA came out as a vocal person against Catholic and Episcopal hospitals as well, because Episcopals, you can't trust them as either. It's just now then into this environment. So we got to get this idea. Money's tight. The panic of 1883. Anti-Catholic forces are organizing, and then something that was going to strike and become a big realization for the monks when they got here, hey, there's not as many Germans as we thought there was going to be out here. It's just, things just don't seem to be coming together. No money, no people, and it looks like we're going to have an active opposition. But Abbot Bernard came out, took the train out September of 1893, so right after the Archbishop, right after the president of the APA, he came out 1893, and he visited the Dryad property. Says, yeah, that's good soil, really good soil. Be a great place to start a farm, but maybe not a school. And then he joined Father Claessens. Remember, he is the pastor of St. Michael's and A.H. Chambers in Olympia, and they went out to the site. And they all climbed up the hill. Now, back in the time, there was a lot of Oregon grape. It was pretty raw land, but they all fought their way up through the brush, got to the top of the hill, and on seeing the view from the top, Mount Tacoma, as they called it back then, was capped with snow. And he said, right here, my college will stand. And then he chose the name St. Martin's for the new foundation. So my guess is that he already knew what he was going to name the place. So, and then Mr. John Byrne, then mayor of Olympia, joined with other businessmen in supporting a foundation for the new college near Olympia. They collected $1,600 despite the cash crunch of the time and used it in exchange for the monks' Dryad property. So they said, okay, you guys put your money into this property in Dryad, great farmland. Listen, we'll buy it. Now you guys have cash. And so, yes. I have to remember to change your guys' view. I'm just changing mine. Okay. Now then the monks go to get their property. Now then, they have the money set. The property's been selected. It's time to go to the auction. This is December 1893. The local APA council gets wind that the monks are trying to buy property and plan on attending the auction in order to outbid the monks for the property, thus fulfilling their oath to stop the spread of Catholic schools. Hey, come on. They took an oath. They got to do this. So on the day of the sale, the judge announced that the sale would be a strictly cash transaction. Who had the cash? That's right, the monks got the cash, not the APA. As cash was short, the APA was unable to follow through on their plans. In December 93, they got the land. Now then, Father John Scott, he challenges this story, says it lacks proof, so come on. It's too good of a story not to be true. But it's recorded in here, and I'm going to trust that because a few of the guys were alive during the time, I'm going to trust these guys, even though John wasn't able to find the paper trail for the exact of what was going on. Now, we got 570 acres, and we purchased it at $10 an acre, so even cheaper than Dryad. But why would you say that? Because it's glacial till and nothing grows in it very well. Oh, but Abbot Bernard, when he saw the land, he saw how big the trees were, and he said, oh, this must be great growing property, because look how tall these trees are. So that's why the brothers farm and the priests deal with chalices, because they don't know anything about land. The sale was confirmed May 24, 1894. 1894. I keep getting that wrong. So the college was then. They had to get some things put together, and they set up a work crew in January of now. What happened was that there was a year delay because there was a tornado at St. John's in 1894. So they had to delay the building of St. Martin's for a year because a tornado just ripped through the campus up in Collegeville, Minnesota. They had to take care of, charity begins at home. Got to take care of things at home before we can take care of things in our new foundation. You guys are going to have to wait a year. But then in January of 1895, they started to build. And it started off with 2 workers showing up. They built a shack, in January and took up residence in that shack in January. As I say, these people are pretty tough people because, I can be pretty sissy when it comes to going outside in January around here. Not because it's cold, because it's wet and cool, and yeah, it's just all the way unpleasant. Now, the building came up pretty fast. So a good brick foundation, everything else is wood. And the basement was going to be the kitchen and the dining rooms. The first floor was going to be where the monks lived. And then the second floor was the classrooms. And the third floor, where it's nice and hottest, would be where the students lived. Okay, I don't blame the monks, but once again, feel sorry for, there's something about us putting kids in the hot places. I just realized that we have a tendency to do that, don't we? Now then, also with this construction, we built this and we're on top of a hill and they put in all this nice plumbing stuff. What did they kind of forget about? Water. They realized, hey, that Woodland Creek? It's like a mile away. So they thought about, okay, we can build a dam. One of the brothers says, hey, I'll just build a dam. We'll get some pipes. We'll pipe it from the dam and bring it right to our house. And they said, how much is that going to cost? They gave the cost. That's how much we're paying to build the building. And so they had the monks start digging a well. And the brother is there digging the well. And he about got himself killed when a bucket came falling down. Fortunately, it hit the wall before it hit his head. But, they had to then pump the water out of a well, fill up a bunch of barrels, put the barrels on a cart, and then hook it up to a team of horses, bring it up the hill, and then they would put it about right here, and then they'd run a hose right to the ceiling, and then there was a big tank on top. So it was gravity-fed plumbing. But they couldn't use it right away because they didn't have sewage. So, but hey, our mistake wasn't as bad as Notre Dame because Notre Dame built a residence hall with no plans for bathrooms. And it was actually caught in Rome. They were looking over the plans and they wrote back, so are your students angels? And then they wrote back, huh? What do you mean? You don't have any bathrooms. Oh, and then they had to redo their plans. But so we got the place built, and then what happens? No, that's Mount Angel. Mount Angel burned down 3 times before they finally got the place to not burn down anymore. No, one student came. Okay, who knows the name of our first student? Okay. Angus MacDonald. Angus. They had cool names back then, didn't they? Angus is from Shelton. And according to legend, he paddled a canoe here to attend school. The monks expected about 4 or 5 students to come the first day, but he was the only one to show up, Angus. But they took him in and they took turns teaching him. Now the thing is that they opened the school. But they didn't have, here's things that they didn't have when they opened the school. Desks. They didn't have any desks. They were sitting on nail kegs and boxes or wooden crates, and they would have wooden crates with boards. And another thing they didn't have stairs to go to the 2nd or 3rd floor yet. They still, and then they had the water situation still not worked out. And so when Father Oswald, who was Baron, who would become our first abbot later, rode back to St. John's, and then there was a new abbot then. His name was Abbot Peter. So Abbot Peter, maybe it's a good thing we only have one student because wow, our place just isn't quite ready, and well, that's how it is. I notice it's about time, but I have, if you don't mind if I go just a little long, you guys okay with that? Okay, because Angus, he was our first admissions worker because, he was the only student for a while, and he didn't kind of like that. He didn't like all the attention. I don't think I would like all the attention either. So he went out on what is now Pacific Avenue, which is going to get the first-class treatment here pretty soon from the city. They have some great strategic plans for that area, but back then it was kind of the highway, and he would try to recruit for the school. He'd see a young man and says, "Hey, don't you want to come to school here?" Well, in one case, he was doing that, and the kid didn't take too kindly to it, and him and Angus got into a fist fight. So all the monks come a-running, "Oh, no, that's our only student," and saved Angus from getting into a nasty fight. Now, over time, a few more students came, and by the end of the year, we had about a dozen students. But what was happening was that students would come, but then around April, letters would come from home and saying, "Hey, we need you back home because the harvest is coming in," or we need you. So it was kind of loose, so the monks started charging the students by the year. So it's like, hey, okay, you can leave, but be sure you pay for the whole year. And it was very precarious, getting started. The reason why Angus was our first student was because his family could pay. They owned a store, just a general store in Shelton. They were the ones with cash. It was a bad time. And also, the thing I find amazing is just how much people in Olympia wanted this college. And then once it was built, one student shows up. It's like, you guys wanted this, right? But I don't know if people were just sour because there weren't the 100 to 200 German families in tow like they expected. Once again, the panic, its effects lasted for several years. And the farmers in Minnesota, they were affected just as much. It wasn't a good time to pack up and leave and follow the monks at this time either. Anyway, the land wasn't all that good anyway. But the monks did get the farm. They did start farming, and I know the farm was active up to about the 50s. And Abbot Neil does have stories about killing chickens back in the day. I think it still affects him, but we got the chickens back. But go ahead. To begin with, like right at the beginning, there are 3 fathers and 4 brothers. So and Father Oswald was appointed the prior of that nascent community. So yeah. So I guess that's a good place to leave off. I'm always happy to. Now I'm hoping to continue the story of St. Martin's further, and that's just something which I'll do in the future. So I want to thank you for being a good and attentive audience and not asking any terribly tough questions and laughing at some of my jokes. So thank you very much.